He's served as a lieutenant, he's an Afghanistan veteran, he's a Rhodes Scholar, and he's running to serve the country as president. Mayor Pete Buttigieg.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Iowa. Everybody hydrating? Okay. Just making sure. My mom always said, if you're thirsty, it's too late. Make sure you take care of yourselves. Thank you so much for the chance to be here. Congratulations to Matt and everybody at Progress, Iowa for the great work that you're doing. To Brett Niles, the county chair here, and all of the local Democrats, I promise you that I will stand with folks at every level of the ticket, because we know that things go better when we demonstrate that we realize the presidency is not the only office that matters. We got work to do in local office. We got work to do in state office. Yes, we got a lot of work to do to send folks like Abby Finkenauer back to Washington, make sure we have the right congressional delegation, and flip that Senate seat once and for all. First time I spoke to a crowd in Iowa was at the corn feed a couple of years ago, so it's pretty exciting to be back. I think it's safe to say a few things have changed since then, definitely for me. Because we've been traveling the country, talking about how America is at the doorstep of a completely new moment in the life of our nation, but that it's not going to go well unless we make it go well. We are lucky and unlucky enough to be living in one of those moments that only comes around once or twice in a lifetime. But these moments come along, and they decide how Democrats and Republicans are going to act for the next 30, 40, 50 years. We're in one of those moments right now. That's why even now, we may well be underreacting to the seriousness of the moment we live in. But it also means there's tremendous opportunity. The New Deal set the tone for how the next 40 years, 50 years would go. The New Deal rested on a better understanding of American freedom than what we're hearing today from the other side of the aisle. And then the New Deal came to an end with Ronald Reagan, and the Reagan era began. The neoliberal era in which Democrats and Republicans talked like the only thing you could ever do to a tax, even on the wealthiest, was cut it, and the only thing you'd ever do to a rule holding back a company from doing something wrong was to remove it. But if the New Deal ended with Reagan, the Reagan era ends with us today. That's why this isn't just about winning an election. This is about winning an era. And if we want to win the era, we got to be true to our deepest values. And I know the word values is a word that far too often is associated with the right. But the values we're talking about are not conservative values, they're American values with progressive implications. And now is when we're gonna break the spell that has people thinking that values voters only have one way to go. Especially the values conservatives talk about most, like freedom. Freedom is not a conservative value, it is an American value. We're the ones who get that you're not free if you don't have health care, and that stops you from starting a small business. Health care is freedom, and that's why we stand up for health care. We're the ones who get that you're not free if you are prevented from organizing into a union to insist on better wages and working conditions. That's why we stand with organized labor. We're the ones who get that you don't have freedom if your reproductive health care is being dictated by male politicians and bosses. Reproductive freedom is American freedom. Yes, we're the ones who know that you're not free if a county clerk gets to tell you who you ought to marry. And by the way, thank you, Iowa, for your contributions to marriage equality across the land. And yes, we're the ones who understand that freedom comes by way of education, which is why it's time for a Secretary of Education who believes in public education. And that's the kind of secretary on the point. These heartland values don't have to lead you into the arms of the Republican Party, especially this Republican Party. that claims the mantle of freedom, that talks about national security like they own it. Not anymore. Not the way they've been acting. We're the ones who get what national security actually requires of us. And it's going to take a lot more than just believing you can solve it by putting up a wall from coast to coast. That's not going to make us secure in the era of cybersecurity threats and election security threats. A wall is not going to protect us from white nationalist violence that's claiming lives here at home and around the world. And if we want to be serious about national security, then we have to demonstrate that we have the common sense to see to it that the Second Amendment will not be a death sentence for thousands of Americans. Americans, including Republicans and gun owners, believe we need universal background checks, believe we need red flag laws to disarm domestic abusers. That is absolutely constitutional, and it is absolutely the right thing to do. And yes, if we mean business about safety and security in our time, then it's time to confront climate disruption and name it for the national security crisis that it is. No one is secure or free until everyone is secure or free. And that's why I've proposed that with the same level of ambition we brought to the Marshall Plan that rebuilt Western Europe, we invest in a Douglas Plan to bring about racial equality for Black Americans in our time. Don't let them tell you that security is a conservative value or freedom is only going to be delivered by Republican policies. And definitely don't let them tell you that people of faith have to vote for people like the president in office right now. Not in our time. Look, we believe and stand for the idea that anyone running for office and anyone in office ought to equally represent people of any religion and people of no religion. Because the separation of church and state is a core American value. It is also the case that for those of us who are guided by faith, faith can point you in a very, very different direction than where the White House is trying to take us today. Faith that commands us to concern ourselves with the well-being of the marginalized. Faith that calls us to feed the hungry and to clothe the sick. Faith that requires us to welcome the stranger, and yes, stranger is a synonym for immigrant. So let's let people of faith know that they have a choice. And it doesn't have to lead you to what we've got today. Because what we have right now flies against the basic sense of decency that any secular or religious tradition teaches us about. The kind of stuff you see coming out of this White House today, telling Americans, the President of the United States telling Americans that they ought to leave this country because they've been in Congress criticizing him.
Yeah.
Bullshit. Very good. The flag that was on my shoulder when I stepped off the C-17 that got me to Afghanistan was a flag that represented a country that honors those who criticize our leaders and never questions their loyalty to the republic for which it stands. That is a basic American principle, and nothing could be more American than standing up for our values. Now, I'm trying to stay ahead of the air horn, and I want to make sure I don't wax too lyrical before coming to the point that I think is especially important for us to take a moment on today, which is that the reality is among the extraordinary, qualified, diverse, talented field of approximately 3,000 Democratic candidates for president who are coming before you in Iowa, we have broad agreement on what we believe in, and that's a good thing. So I'd like to turn to another subject, which is how are we going to win?
Yeah.
America cannot withstand 4 more years of this current president. And I'm here with a warning, which is that I can also see how he wins again. And it's not about how left or how right we go, okay? If we embrace a left-wing agenda, the president's going to say we're socialists and we're for open borders. If we adopt a conservative agenda, the president's going to say we're socialists and we're for open borders. So we might as well just stand up for what we believe in and take it from there. what could happen. If we look like our message is nothing but a return to normal, back to normal, and I get the appeal because whatever we got now is not okay and is not normal. But here's the thing, and I don't have to tell you this in Iowa, coming from the industrial Midwest in my own community, normal didn't work. Normal hasn't worked the entire time I've been alive. And so we cannot promise a return to the 90s or the 2000s any more than the president can keep his promise to return us to the 1950s, and we shouldn't try. There is only the future, and we can make the future better than the past. And that means bold action. It means something completely different. And I'll leave you with this thought. The American people tend to choose the opposite of whatever they just had. And I would argue it doesn't get more opposite than the current president of the United States, than a laid-back, intellectual, gay, veteran, millennial mayor from the industrial Midwest. So I hope that I'm your guy. Can I look to you to help us propel a different kind of politics in our time? Are you ready to change the channel off that horror show they got going on in Washington? Do you not feel just enough hope to bring about a better day? Then I can't wait to